Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I'd come on here and just share some of my recollections of what life was like growing up during the 90s and the 2000s, and what life was like for me at Christmas time, growing up with my family and all, and even into the 2010s and today. But I wanted to, one reason why I do a lot of what I do on my YouTube channel here, sharing different stories and all, is because one day when the Lord takes me home, whenever that happens to be, because only He knows when that'll happen, I want to be sure that my channel here is a good time capsule of just different recollections and adventures and all that I've had here during my time, during my dash through life. You know, in life, they say, on person's gravestone that it's not the birthday and the death date that really stand out the most. Most important thing is the little dash in between. And, I like doing these different videos and all to be sure that even after the Lord takes me home, folks will still be able to remember Wesley Hillman. They'll be able to, share these recollections they've had of me with people, and, you know, and with people that I may never get to meet while I'm here this side of heaven, but will get to meet in heaven. So, without further ado, jump right on into some Christmas recollections. And, my first Christmas was in 1992 whenever I was a baby. Of course, obviously, I really don't have any major recollections from the first few Christmases of my life, which I don't think anyone really does, kind of like Forrest Gump talked about. Like, I don't remember what I got for my first Christmas. I don't, and he went on down the list of different things of his first that he didn't remember. However, Christmas, has always been a very special time that I've always enjoyed throughout my life. It was always a time that I look forward to every year. And even to this day, I do, despite the changes that have transpired over the years in my life and my family and those who I know and love. But Christmas time most certainly has a special place in my heart, and especially for what it's about, which is about the birth of Jesus Christ. And especially as a Christian, especially with having accepted Christ at an early age, that has most certainly played a huge part in why I enjoy this time of the year so much. And, from my earliest memories, I remember, like helping out the Christmas tree sales we had at the blind school. I talked about my Christmas tree salesman video. And also, whenever I was in the Christmas programs at the blind school, my earliest recollection most certainly would be whenever I was in kindergarten and sung a solo, which was "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." You can find that here on my channel. And I was 6 years old that year, and that was really neat how I was able to sing a solo from the rest of my classmates and the other people in the other grades surrounding me. However, that's one of my earliest memories I can recall. And throughout my childhood, usually the way Christmas Eve and Christmas worked was my family and I on Christmas Eve, we would come up here to my paternal grandparents' home and have a dinner. And not only would a lot of our family members be here, but friends of our family who were like family would be here as well. And then one of Santa's helpers would show up, as Santa Claus, and hand out presents to everybody. And that was always really cool. They will get some Christmas presents up here. There we have the get together up here. And then, Christmas Day with my parents and then with my maternal grandparents. But, Christmas Eve usually was spent with my dad's side of the family, and that was always a lot of fun. And, we would just all this whole house up here, which where I live is my paternal grandparents' old house, and also, being up here and all, there are definitely many days I get to thinking back to that time in my life whenever this house would just be full of people. And, there's a lot of them who have gone on to be with the Lord now. And that was a very special time for my family and I. But, the next morning, I can remember, Christmas Eve night, we would put out the milk and cookies for Santa. And I remember my daddy reading "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" to us. That was a tradition we had for several years. And I remember us going and seeing the nativity scene and Christmas lights at the state capitol. And usually after we would be at Grandma and Grandpa's up here Christmas Eve, we would go by Santa's house and get candy canes from Santa, and one of his elves would be there. And it was just a really neat display of Christmas lights there. But, we would be up bright and early Christmas morning. Usually, my sister and I would hardly sleep a wink Christmas Eve night, which I think even into adulthood, a lot of us sometimes may not always sleep too much the night of Christmas Eve going into Christmas Day. But it was always a fun and exciting time wondering, oh man, am I going to get what I wanted? What am I going to get? And one thing I always liked on Christmas Eve was we received a little bit of an appetizer for what was to come for Christmas Day, because I think it was, about maybe like 6 or 7 or so, whenever we started being allowed to open up one present on Christmas Eve. And that was really cool. I think the first Christmas present I remember getting whenever we started that tradition was a puzzle, which was of Snuffleupagus. And, that was, a big deal to be able to open up at least one present on Christmas Eve. And, my family's policy was, because my family would usually get the presents wrapped and under the tree weeks before Christmas and all. It'd usually be after Thanksgiving, obviously, after Christmas shopping was done and all. But the policy was that if we opened up a present before we were allowed to, that item went back to the store, which thankfully we never violated that rule because we didn't want to lose any of our presents. But it was nice, like whenever my parents would go Christmas shopping and all, usually on Black Friday or right after, my sister and I would wind up at my Aunt Deanna's house, Uncle Bruce's place, or with my Aunt Sue and Uncle Johnny and my cousin Shasta and them. So those were a couple of the places we'd usually wind up when my parents would be out Christmas shopping when we were kids. But Christmas morning, we'd usually get here bright and early, and we'd be up real early. I'd say around the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock hour, rushing for our toys. And when it comes to different gifts I've received over the years from childhood, some that stand out to me was the old pickup truck, the old battery-powered pickup truck I was able to ride around in around the yard. I was like 5 or 6 when I got that, and then when I was 7, when I got my own TV for my bedroom, that was a really big deal, because I remember when my sister Rachel had a TV in her room, and I was saying, like, man, I want my own TV too. And I finally got that whenever I was 7 years old, at Christmas of 1999. But I was just so excited knowing that I'd be able to, watch whatever I wanted to watch without having to be in the living room and all anymore. Because before then, I'd have to watch TV in the living room, whatever it was, whether it's cartoons or whatever program it was. Another gift that stands out to me that I've received over the years for Christmas would probably be, especially within the last 10 years, would be when I received my first Apple Watch. I mean, I know that was, I was a little older when I got that, but the Apple Watch, it really just saved my life and really helped me to get in shape health-wise. And so that really was a great gift that I was able to get for Christmas of 2016. And then a few years ago, for Christmas of 2021, I believe it was, my dad actually got me a Red Ryder BB gun, just like the one Ralphie had in A Christmas Story. And I really think that's even cool now. I thought it was neat back then getting a BB gun for Christmas. I was an adult, a few years ago, obviously. I was like my late 20s when I got that, but still, to have a BB gun is a lot like the one Ralphie had in that movie. That's pretty cool, and especially now, having gone to the Christmas Story house and having seen that movie, I mean, it's even more special that I have that. And it's definitely neat just looking back on all the different Christmas gifts I have received over the years, because I've received many different gifts over the years. And when I look back on my childhood and all, we were very blessed on all the different presents we got, because we got a good amount of stuff, especially when you look at what the older generations got. And a lot of times they were lucky if they only got 1 or 2 gifts. I remember when I got the Quantum Leap pad, that was really neat. Whenever I was younger, back then, to have a device that would tell me about like the United States and all. What really stands out to me more though was, I think I was 12 when I got this, but I got a interactive map of the United States, which was really neat. Told you all different kinds of facts about the United States. And then I even got a deal which had many different facts about the U.S. presidents, and those were really neat gifts too. But whenever it came to Christmas Day, we would go to my Nanny and Paul's after we opened our gifts and everything. And we would usually get a few more presents there. And, as I've gotten older, the gifts are not as important to me. I mean, it's nice to get a few presents now, but it's definitely not like whenever I was a kid. And one thing that I'm very thankful for, especially with my grandparents now being in heaven and having many friends and other folks I've known who have gone on to glory, this time of year, it's those precious memories that really mean a lot to me. Looking back on the great memories from the past Christmases, and most importantly, the importance of the holiday, which is, about the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I really do appreciate that. And, it's been neat over the years, having done different things. While some things have not stuck as annual traditions, there have been some things that were traditions for a few years and some that have changed. Right after my paternal grandfather died, I mean, my paternal grandmother kept the Christmas stuff going for a little bit up here, but it was never like what it once was. And then, now, I've started new traditions like going to the governor's mansion each year for their Christmas open house. And for the longest time, it's tradition for me has been to go to the blind school to see the kids perform their Christmas program. But, with the changing times, the different chapters in life, there are traditions that do change. But no matter what changes in life, God never does change. And that's one thing that we can take comfort in. And that's one thing I'm very thankful for. And I'm very thankful for all these memories I have to look back on, and, to all the people I've had the honor and privilege of spending Christmas with over the years. It's been a real treat. We'll just scratch the surface with some, like Christmas recollections and things. But, it's maybe one day I'll do another video, some more recollections, and go from there. But I hope you all have a happy and blessed Merry Christmas and a happy and blessed New Year. And keep in mind that there are many people who are hurting, who are going through a tough time, maybe their first Christmas without a certain friend or loved one around. We have our troops, our first responders, those who are having to work. Let's be sure to keep them all lifted up in our thoughts and prayers. And may God bless each and every one of you this Christmas and beyond as we get ready to head into 2026 as well. Take care, everybody.